the rest of the session. We will start with two items that are coming back from discussion yesterday. The first is agenda item 18, the Small Grants Programme revised financing structure. We'll then move to agenda item 19, the country support programme. After that, we will have two agenda items. Agenda item 22, the membership of the Ethics Committee, and agenda item 23, other business. Having concluded those items, we will then have the session on the LDCF and the SCCF before wrapping with the joint summary of the co-chairs. So just to clarify, we're about to start agenda item 18, Small Grants Programme, then 19, Country Support Programme, 22, Ethics, 23, Other Business. So agenda item 18, a paper has been circulated, and I'll ask Naoko to talk to that paper.
Thank you, Peter, and very good morning to everyone. So yesterday we had a very good discussion on the SGP, and overnight we have reflected a lot of the comments which are tabled, and then what you have seen in front of you, a kind of revised proposal from us, and now Francois will explain to you that there are two reasons which are behind under this new proposal. So I hope that we capture that yesterday's discussion, and this is something I think that you could possibly consider. Francois.
Thank you very much. So we're returning to the discussion that we opened yesterday on the small grant program, and it is clear that on this topic there are trade-offs to be assessed. There is a general satisfaction with the performance of the program and the impact that it generates, and there's an appreciation for the engagement that it allows with communities and the vector of innovation that it represents, and the potential of scaling up that it creates. Now the question is, of course, how to dimension that in the context of the various program offerings of GEF-7, and that question has always been with us in the past. There always has been caps to the use of STAR for SGP. The caps, in fact, have been brought down between GEF-5 and GEF-6 in a context where in GEF-5, the amount of resources that ended up being deployed in SGP were quite large, and therefore the underlying thinking behind the proposal, the new proposal that we have brought forward, is in the spirit of striking a balance here. And so as we went ahead with trying to propose the right numbers, and also factoring in what we heard yesterday, which is that our first proposal was potentially too restrictive, we looked at, again, the historical use of STAR resources for by countries above and beyond the ones of the core funding, or for the graduated ones, their own choices of resources engagement. And we've seen that in average in GEF-6, the use of resources for graduated countries was $2.7 million, and that in countries in the category that are receiving core funding were, again, way below the threshold that we're proposing. So we went ahead with a proposal that would adjust the ceilings at a level that is not restrictive vis-à-vis the previous averages, is in fact above it, and that would be 3 million, down from 5 for graduated countries. And for non-graduated countries, we are proposing to keep the number to what we had proposed yesterday, which is essentially 10% of their STAR allocation, not to exceed $1 million. And our sense here is that if we were to go above that, we would then open up the possibility of funding that is necessary to materialize the targets that have been defined otherwise by GEF-7 to be diverted into the small grant program. And we're not suggesting that they wouldn't be productive in the small grant program, but they would be serving a different purpose. So the issue is one of finding a balance between the role of the small grant program, which is one of innovation, initiating, reaching out into, and permitting scaling up, and the key role of delivering on the targets that the replenishment has given us. The amount of financing involved in this is quite considerable, and even with this threshold, on top of the $128 million that are part of the core funding, the amount of resources that could be mobilized is quite high, because as a ceiling, it would be $141 million. So what we're submitting is that the Council and the countries have to help us with that act of balance here. It allows to more than double the amount at the current set of ceilings. That is a challenge already for results. We think it would be unwise to go beyond that. Thank you.
Thank you, Françoise. So, Council members, any comments, reflections on the document circulated, please? Okay, not seeing any flags up. Can we adopt this? Oh, no, I see Laura. Laura, please.
Gracias. Gracias a la Thank you, and thank you to the Secretariat for preparing this adjustment that you have presented in this new document. We understand, or we're trying to understand, what you're proposing. However, I think there is enough evidence that this SGP is a program that channels significant resources to the grassroots communities. These communities have different access rules that do not apply to other projects, and thus allows these populations, these communities, to have access to these funds. These are communities that are in direct contact with natural resources, and this is very important if we want to achieve GEF's objectives and goals. It would be very complex to say that we wouldn't have access to the same amount of resources that we've had historically. Basically, this offers a possibility to have a long-term vision about sustainability of projects and how we can keep these grassroots communities linked to these resources and who have an interest in making a contribution to the implementation of a variety of conventions. This is why we have been working with many CSOs, and this is politically and strategically important because it proves that we are contributing to global environmental goals. This is why we would like to insist on reviewing this proposal that you're making. We would ask that we keep the guidelines that we had for GEF-6, the ceiling of 2 million and 5 million. In the case of our constituency, and in particular in Colombia, we work with SGPs and SGP projects in a very different way. We are able to generate resources thanks to the way in which we are working. It would be very negative for us not to have access to this, to the usual amount of resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Camilla, please.
Gracias. Si bien entendemos que hay encontrar.
Thank you. Although we understand that we must find a balance between the resources and what we can support, we believe that this is a very important project for the region, a very important project for the countries in our group. Because with all of these reduction of resources, it's very complicated to develop full projects and to attract the interest of implementing agencies so they can work on these smaller projects. So this is a viable option. It's a viable option that does not have any other financial mechanism, international financial mechanism. And this is one of the advantages that GEF has with regards to all the other funds that are available that require full projects. And these indigenous communities, these marginal communities, do not have access to these full-fledged projects. So in our group, Mexico has used in many of their projects, these resources, they've gone beyond this amount, not in GEF 6, but in previous replenishment exercises. And many of the countries, as I said, of our constituency, have shown an interest in continuing to use these resources. We are in fact worried that we lose this flexibility. So we reiterate our interest in this point. Yesterday it was very obvious that it had been successful. We have the results to show that it is worthwhile to maintain the efforts specifically for this project. So we would ask the Secretariat to take this into account. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilla. Aparna, and then I think it was Manrique next.
Thank you, Chair. I am keenly appreciative of the usefulness of the SGP, particularly for ensuring the involvement of communities and community-based organizations in GEF programs, and also generally in the delivering the commitments of the countries to multilateral environmental agreements. I feel that possibly the moderation in the amount that is permitted under the star allocation to be used for SGP has been motivated by two factors, and Secretariat can correct me. One is to ensure, one is based on the actual utilization, which was mentioned by Francois yesterday, and the second is possibly to again focus on impactful programs rather than fragmented programs. I am therefore willing to look at this revised proposal of the Secretariat, but I would like to have three related topics also to be taken into consideration. Number one, perhaps we should look at whether we are building too close dependency relationship between the financing and the commitment and capacity of the community organizations. So whether are we repeatedly financing the same organizations or the same communities? In that case, perhaps the sustainability and internalization of the capacity that we are building is brought into question, and that we would have to look at the efficacy of the program. So this is something where we should examine and try to understand what is actually happening. The second is, as I said yesterday, I would look for a larger impact from the funding. So larger impact in terms of creating innovations that are actually scalable and replicable. Number two, having the indicators, as has been mentioned by my colleagues, which are aligned with GEF indicators. So if these three things can be woven into the decision, I think the change in the amount can become more, we can understand it a little better. Thank you.
Thank you, Aparna. I think that's a very sensible suggestion, and I think I saw a couple of nods around the table, and I'm sure the Secretariat will come back to that. Manrique, please.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Peter. We support the comments of Laura and Camilla. We believe that these programs, in our constituency at least, they are and continue to be successful. These are very important for their implementation. In summary, they are small grants, but they provide enormous opportunities for the communities and the groups that they are directed to. Therefore, we believe that it's important to maintain the current situation, in other words, the GEF-6 situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Manrique. Joss, UK, please.
First of all, thank you very much for this revised note, which sorted me out from the point of view of my unclarity yesterday, so thank you for that. Now being clear, I find myself in pretty much complete agreement with Aparna that it is necessary, as the summary paragraph in your notes suggests, to moderate or to find the balance between the proportion of effort through the SGP as distinct from other activities under STAR allocations, and that the proportion you've arrived at is derived from a sense of the balance of impact and the need to make sure we reach our targets for GEF-7, which are demanding, rightly so, but also allow the flexibility countries require, and we've heard from 2, 3 with recent and relevant and strong experience of this. So that seems to me right. We'll hear from others as to whether or not they accept the balance, but the rationale is acceptable to me and intelligible and defensible to me, so thank you for it. I think the other points Aparna was making, though, about thinking afresh and thinking more demandingly of the way the SGP contributes to the achievement of the results of the GEF in toto is also very important, given that it is now a very large proportion of STAR allocations. I'm not so sure about the point on avoiding the creation of dependency, because I'm just ignorant of that issue. It may well be a point, but sustainability certainly should be looked at. But more linking the results indicators to the program more generally does seem to me a very solid suggestion to make. We hear a lot about innovation and so on, and I don't doubt it, but I think that we should proactively seek it and make more effort to evince it as we go on. So I'd be very happy to weave those components into whatever is the Council's view of the right balance.
Thank you, Joss. So I think I might just ask Françoise to pick up a couple of things, but actually just before doing that, I see Joss from Belgium, but just to conclude that, and also actually we have Wang also, but just to remind colleagues that we are looking to try and land decisions on a couple of items. We have limited time available, so if we can be consensual wherever possible and brief, that would be appreciated. Joss, please.
Yeah, thank you, and good morning, colleagues. This is a difficult one, isn't it? Because I hear the clear call from the directly involved, albeit only from one region, more or less. And then I hear the Secretariat, I think, sound reasoning on the delivery of on the targets and stuff. Very good suggestions from my colleague from across the room here. On those, your first point is, as Joss said, I don't know what to think about it, if it is an issue. On the second point, I think we always saw the SGP as a stepping stone to MSPs and so on. So in that sense, I don't know if we need to look at scalability of SGP projects. I mean, the scalability for me comes when the positive effect of SGP experiences into bigger projects, which would then deliver on the targets. So that nexus there is, I mean, it's not easy, but there is something there. So, and in favor of having the SGP stronger. On the third one, the indicators, I thought that the result framework of the SGP is very close to the general GEF one. So I don't think that's an issue. So I don't know what to say. I'm just putting these points for these aspects for reflection, and I'm still thinking, and I'm inclined to support those who are really involved and know what they're doing in the field. But of course, we cannot lose sight of the broader objectives of this organization. I may come back then on this, sorry, but I mean, let's think about it.
Thank you, Jos. Wang, please.
Well, thank you. I try to be as brief as possible. Well, I would like to flag three comments here. First one, actually, we are talking about, if I understand right, we are talking about the flexibility we could give to the recipient countries in terms of how much they could have the counterpart star allocation to support the small grant project. So I would like to say, in line with the country ownership principle, I would like to suggest that we should, trust the recipient countries to have them to decide how much they would like to, allocate from their own star allocations to support SPG. Second is, I agree with the comment made by my colleagues from Colombia, Mexico, about this as GP provide excellent opportunities to the root grass community to directly access to the GF finance resources. So in this regard, the public awareness of GF will be significantly enhanced by implementing of these small grant programs. The third one is, the number you are now proposing is based on the actual fact from GF6. Although at that time we set a relatively hard ceiling, but the true expenditure is much lower than that ceiling. To me, it seems like even we maintain the higher ceiling or the same ceiling as GEF6, it might for most of the countries, they will not reach that ceiling. So, I mean, I don't see very dramatic risk we could meet if we change that standard. So basically speaking, I don't think there's much need for us to change the policy at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Wang. Laura, please.
Gracias, señor copresidente.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chairman. I've asked the floor again because I believe that there's a lack of clarity as to how it works, how the small grants program works. Yes, it's true that at the national level, when we design the ways of accessing the SGPs, we do it taking into account GEF's indicators. These small projects that reach the grassroots communities are also contributing to the indicators. If it's resources and biodiversity, we are supporting these indicators, these objectives, or whichever other area that's doing it. I don't know whether we're doing it correctly, but that's the way we're doing it in our group, because we believe that it's a complementary strategy to the fully fledged project that we're working on. With regards to sustainability, I do not necessarily mean or want to say that the program would finance 1 or 2 or 3 times the same organizations. What this means is that the program is a program sustainable over time, and that it does not depend on the will of each country. The country has the right to resources to start to maintain these strategies, and that is what the country wishes. Then it would be maintained on the long term. And this is also quite interesting for our work with civil society and the people who are directly at the grassroots. The other issue, I think Clara mentioned it, is the issue of how these resources reach the people involved. There is an agency, there are mechanisms, there are administrative costs. Finally, these are resources that reach the end result, or reach the field much more rapidly to produce better lifestyles for the communities, or a better conservation of biodiversity, something positive for climate change, depending on which thematic area we're working on. And to this end, I believe that what we have been submitting to you, it's a successful program. We have done very good things in all countries. Some countries like ours, Colombia, we started very recently with these SGPs programs for different reasons. And we are very enthusiastic on its continuity and its application. And that is perhaps why it's a decision of the country to define how many resources should be transferred to this program. There is still a lot to do. Even countries who've graduated, they want to keep working with this strategy. It's a complementary strategy. There's minimum resources if we compare them to the resources required for the fully fledged projects, but they are generating an important impact. So it's quite clear. I would like the council members to take this in mind or have this in mind when we're discussing this issue. Thank you.
Points are well noted. Clearly the impact the program is having in your region is significant. Of course, what we're trying to do is to land a decision that applies to the global nature of the program. And as Jos Belgium said, it's difficult. So again, we're looking to develop on GEF-6, but in a way that will deliver against GEF-7. So with that, I might just ask Naoko to comment on a couple of the comments that come from the floor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the all very thoughtful comments. And as you may hear from Francois, the reason we have proposed this new change is actually that Belgium just very nicely reflected. It is a very difficult issue. The one we fully admit and acknowledge that this is a very important and a program which is very different from, in a sense, that other sources of the fund. And so that we all, I think, acknowledge the usefulness of the SGP at the same time, as many of you also, some of you noticed that right now there is not really the clear linkage between this program with the results framework of the GEF-7. And when we see that under GEF-7, that the star allocation is actually coming down, and if we just continue to have this GEF-6 rule, that the potential leakage, the money kind of lost from the start to the SGP becoming bigger and bigger, and we were worried about if we can deliver the results we agreed at GEF-7 replenishment. So that was one of the considerations that why we are trying to kind of to harness the risk of that the huge leakage which will undermine the results which we are agreed. And it is actually, there are two things in it. The one is that currently there is no linkage between that, this is not a part of the GEF GEF-7 results agreement, so that we need to maybe to think about how to link up, that how to firmly incorporate the results coming from SGP with that GEF-7 results framework, so that at least we can see that how much the SGP actually contribute to the results framework which we already agreed. So that's one which we need to really work on, that when that UNDP can come back to us, or we present that the results frame their arrangement in December. The second point, which I also would like to go back to to reflect on the fact Belgium just said, that the SGP is supposed to go from SGP to MSP to the full program, which has not been really confirmed. So this is another important issue we really need to look into. But apparently and also third point is that the reason behind that we are proposing it, we really look at an actual number, and then we thought that our proposal really does not harm the ongoing activity. So that is the reason behind it. But it seems that there is a very strong support for the current rule, and so maybe one proposal would be that on condition of those linking up that the SGP results with the GEF-7 results framework, and to do a very good exercise, the assessment or evaluation to scalability, sustainability, is this really linking from SGP to MSP to full the program, maybe that on condition of having those very clear and professional assessment, maybe we should be able to go back to the maybe GEF-7, GEF-6 rules. That may be one proposal of thinking. I just like to see that if that is something we all agree, that we need to do a lot of work, by the way.
Thank you, Naoko, and I saw some nods in agreement to that, so that's very positive. Stefan, your flag was up, but is now down, I think. So you wish to floor, Stefan, please. Then Aparna.
I had my flag up, then I put it down as I heard the explanation by Naoko, and I think this is what we could go along with. We heard the different interventions from our colleagues from Latin America, and if one thinks of biodiversity projects, it's obvious that probably the biggest return for your money you get by using it through small grants program with indigenous people, with local communities. So that one said, why should we cap star allocation going towards that? Somehow makes sense to me from a results point of view. But then again, there's the scarce resources that you say, where do we use them? I mean, we don't cap, for instance, star going towards impact programs. Actually, we want countries to utilize star in order to get engaged in the impact programs. But as you described it at the end, with a good linkage to the results framework, that makes sense to us, and we could go along with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. I'm glad I invited you back in. Aparna, please, followed by Jos from Belgium.
Yeah, so I also want to say that these last comments made by Naoko address the concerns that I have. It is not the quantum of the money so much, but how we link it to the overall GEF results framework. And it will also, I think, pay tribute to the concept of country ownership that has been also raised by Zhang Jing here. So it is a good way to go ahead. We'll focus on effectiveness rather than merely on the quantity. I think it's a good way.
Thank you, Aparna. Jos, please.
Thank you. If I remember well, the Independent Evaluation Office a while ago has actually given us the conclusion that SGP often lead to MSPs. I think that comes not from the latest, I admit, but a while ago, before UHA, I'm pretty sure. I do remember a couple of things every once in a while. So has that changed? I don't know. I think it's still valid. But I think I can go along with your suggestion, Naoko, if I understand it well. Were you saying that we keep the GEF-6 arrangements now, but we look more into the results, and in doing so, what the contribution to the targets, the overall targets is? I mean, of course, then it's. I think it's a good solution, and I support it.
Thank you, Joss. And I think what we would do, the Secretary would be to have that reflected in the decision. So either to be read out, or possibly, if time allows and printing helps, we will try and get something around very quickly. Camilla, please.
Solo agradecer a nombre de...
On behalf of my constituency, I would like to thank you for taking our arguments into consideration. I believe that Naoko's suggestion, proposal is acceptable, totally acceptable, and we are willing to revise this. We believe that the results will show the replicability and the scaling up of these projects, and from now on, if we maintain GEF-6, we will be very thankful for that. Thank you.
Colleagues, I think that was a very helpful second discussion this morning. I think we've landed at a point we can agree on. So if you agree, I'll ask the Secretariat to work up a revised decision text. If we can get it around in time on paper, we'll do that, but it will be with you no later than the review of the joint summary of co-chairs. So thank you for the contributions on that item. With that, we'll move forward on to the return to agenda item 19, Country Support Programme. Again, paper was circulated with revised recommended decision text, and I'll again ask Naoko to quickly talk to that before seeking views. Thank you.
Thank you. This is again the continuation from yesterday's discussion. We made some revised draft, and which is on at your table. And maybe no explanation is needed. No. Yeah, I think it's a very straightforward one. So maybe you could just open the floor.
Okay, very straightforward, Council. I hope you agree, and I'll leave the floor open for a minute if anyone has any comments. But if we can move to adopt that and keep process. I see Jane, please.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I take the floor just to welcome the continuation of the Country Support Program and to thank those that came up with the text. I think it clarifies a number of things for us. And as we saw in UA's presentation yesterday, our region has not performed well in the utilization and implementation of GEF projects. So we welcome the support there. We value the contribution that the CSP has made to building capacity and institutions in our region at the national level and regional level, and the focus placed early in GEF-7 as we launch it to program funds to identify national priorities and to follow through so it can contribute to the global impact that we all aspire to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Nathan, please.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair, and thank you to the Secretariat for revising the report and recommendations. We think the revised document reflects the views the Council expressed yesterday around the importance of front-loading outreach early in GEF-7 to support recipient decisions around participation in impact programs, efficient use of GEF resources, and to help build an understanding of GEF-7 strategies and policies. We think this is incredibly important if we're to deliver on the ambition of GEF-7. We're also pleased that the GEF workshop component is retained under the first line item. We understand that support delivered via this modality during GEF-6 really helped some smaller recipients to program their star allocation, and we think that's really important too. One final point: on Sunday, when we discussed the gender implementation strategy and action plan, we expressed a desire to see it integrated into the delivery of the CSP where appropriate. So I'll just repeat that point here. Thank you.
Thank you, Nathan. Seeing no other flags, can we adopt this decision? Thank you. Okay, we now move to agenda item 22 on the Ethics Committee. Sorry, bear with me 1 second, colleagues. Thank you for your patience, colleagues. So the document was circulated. The decision is to note that the Council, having considered the document, updates the membership of the committee, specifically with Marisa replacing the former US Council member Mitchell Silk, and Marta from Peru replacing her predecessor, Jose Antonio. Can I take it that we can agree to that decision? Thank you. It was worth the wait. Thank you, colleagues. Right, we move then to agenda item 23, other business, and I think there were a couple of items. So if I could see flags from those council members who wished to include items under other business, please. Thank you, Syed.
Thank you, Mr. Co-Chair. I wonder whether I would like to draw the attention of the Council on the one issue. As I mentioned earlier this week, in the first day of the Council, I mentioned that the allocation of my constituency from GEF-5 and GEF-6 have been blocked by one of the donors since early GEF-5 period. We have submitted a project identification form for sustainable land management in the Ilam province and rehabilitation, expansion, and sustainable management of the arid and semi-arid landscape of Western Iran in January and February 2016 respectively. We have not heard anything yet from the Secretariat, while we should have been requested to modify the PIF or have it confirmed during the first 4 weeks of its submission. Also, we have requested 1.5 million US of our star allocation for our SGP in February 2016, and we received indication from UNDP immediately that it had been confirmed. However, once again and against all rules and regulation, we were told that even SGP fund is not applicable for us. Therefore, I would like to draw the attention of the Council to this important issue and save the GEF of being politically paralyzed. It would be appreciated if my brief statement be reflected in the proceeding of the Council and the same agenda item, I mean any other business. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Syed. Duly noted, and I can confirm that that will be reflected in the record of the meeting. Thank you. Stefan, please.
Thank you, Chair. You may remember that we took a decision yesterday on the ad hoc working group on governance, and we were looking for volunteers, and the search was successful. We have 4 constituencies that are willing to work in that ad hoc working group, and with this, we believe that at this council we could actually decide on the membership of it. Is that right? So let me, and William, you correct me if I mess up. We have volunteers from the constituency represented here by Argentina, the Caribbean constituency, the constituency of Southern Africa represented here by our colleague from Botswana, and how could I forget my neighbor to the right, constituency represented by India. That's for the developing country side, and for the other group of countries around the table, we have Japan, the United States, Germany, and the constituency of Azerbaijan, Central Asia, and Switzerland.
Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you.
That's excellent progress. The committee is off to a great start under your guidance, Stefan. We can look to have that follow-up decision, or that second point of the decision, incorporated into the text that goes into the joint summary, if colleagues around the table are in agreement. Camilla is asking for the floor?
Yeah.
Yes.
Una pequeña corrección.
A minor correction. From the developed countries, it's Mexico, not Argentina, who would be interested. Developing countries.
Discreetly implement some graduation decisions there, but we'll... Thank you, Camilla. So, if colleagues are happy with that, that will be reflected in the decision for the joint summary. Thank you, Stefan. Next on my list, Brian, please.
Thank you. The United States strongly supports the Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency, or CBIT, trust fund, and its mission to enhance transparency. Due to administrative procedures within the U.S. government, we recently found ourselves requiring a short extension to be able to commit the final $5 million tranche of our support to CBIT. The United States asked the Council for consideration of an extension to the date of the CBIT Trust Fund's ability to accept new funds until October 31st, 2018. This will ensure sufficient time to finalize all necessary procedures as well as the transfer of funds. We sincerely appreciate the Council's support for this short-term administrative solution and reiterate our support of the goal of the CBIT to strengthen the institutional and technical capacities of developing countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, and that is duly noted. Last flag I see, Aparna, please.
Thank you, Chair. As the Council is no doubt aware, India has been supporting GEF since the pilot avatar and in subsequent replenishments. Although our capacity is limited, India has tried to support GEF in view of the acknowledgement of the importance of the work that is being done and the impact that it has far beyond the resources available to GEF. In this replenishment for GEF 7, we had in the Stockholm replenishment meeting announced that we would continue our support with the same level of contribution that was made in GEF 6. I have been pursuing with the authorities since before the Stockholm meeting and have provided sufficient material. So I'm happy to report that although a bit late in the day, the authorities in India have made a decision to increase the contribution from India to the GEF replenishment 7. I admit that we should have had this decision by Stockholm, but any fault relating to my being able to announce this only today should be at my door because of the efforts that I had made to provide sufficient material to bring about the decision. The Government of India has therefore now decided to increase the contribution for GEF 7 by 25% in US dollar terms from over its GEF 6 contribution. So that would mean that instead of 12 million US dollars, we will be in a position to contribute $15 million. I hope that the Secretariat and the trustee will not be too inconvenienced in accepting and reflecting this small contribution at this stage. Thank you so much, and thank you for your indulgence.
We will surely reflect your additional contribution with huge admiration to your effort. Thank you so much.
And absolutely, Aparna. And I think rather than lay any blame at your door, the Council has to congratulate you for your sterling advocacy with your authorities. We all know how difficult it is to deal with our treasuries and our finance ministers. So, Aparna, the credit goes to you. Thank you very much. Okay. Jos, Belgium, I see your leg.
Yeah, well, I'm not so sure that we can accept money after the deadline.
Yeah, very
huge
flexible.
administrative burden, isn't it? But no, thank you very much. I wish I could say the same for Belgium. And I would like to come back to a point on the CBIT, as we know, the Capacity Building Initiative for Transparency. Well, at least from my side, I'm perfectly willing to extend that deadline, given the fact that it is a highly relevant initiative that the GEF took up first day after when it was decided, and has received a lot of recognition also and appreciation, and it's going to continue. But I just wanted to flag that for those of us who are not too much involved in the climate arena. It is an important initiative, and we are very thankful to the US for having contributed as one of the first ones. Actually, announced it, and we do understand, especially in my country, we have 7 parliaments and any decision takes a while, and so we can easily understand that sometimes things run a bit late, and so we're very happy that the pledge is still there and will be fulfilled, and if the small measure to take is a small extension of the deadline, since we do it for receiving contributions, we should do it for receiving these contributions also. Thank you.
Thank you, Jos, and the Chair recognises your flexibility on these matters. Thank you very much. There's one more item, but I just want to close off and just to, given that at the commencement of the meeting, Manrique, you initially said you had a point of order, a point for other items, but it was dealt with during the course of the meeting's proceedings, so that just closes that off. Thank you. With that, William, I think on questions of dates of council meetings, please. Not yet. We need to adopt the decision on the CBIT Trust Fund. So if I can read. Actually, has it been circulated? Yes. Okay, it's in front of you. I don't need to read it out. Can we adopt this decision as just circulated? Excellent. Thank you, colleagues. William, you're up.
Thank you very much. So just let me start off by reminding everybody that because the CBD COP changed its dates, we had to change the council dates for this year, and therefore the 55th council meeting will take place December 17 to 20 in Washington as usual. The 56th council, which is the first one next year, has already been decided at previous meetings, June 3 to 6, 2019. So now we come to the decision on the dates for the 57th council meeting, which is at the end of 2019. After looking at the various meetings that we know already, the most appropriate date would seem to be December 9 to 12, 2019. So that's the proposal, that the 57th council meeting take place in Washington, D.C. as usual, December 9 to 12, 2019. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, William. There being no flags up, so decided. Thank you very much. Colleagues, that concludes, or rather leads us to a break in the GEF Council agenda now for approximately 1 hour, and we will conduct our business on LDCF and SCCF. And that will allow the Secretariat time to finalise the joint summary of co-chairs, which will be circulated towards the end of the next hour. I know that some will look for this, look to take a quick break. Please don't stray too far. We want to maintain progress we've made this morning and want everyone to be here to go through the joint summary. So we will just have a 1 minute break and then come in. Okay, so in fact we're going to go straight on and for the LDCF-SCCF, and I'll pass to Naoko.
Yeah. Because we were actually 2 hours behind the schedule, and we will continue to co-chair, so you have some freedom to meet your needs. Okay. Yeah, please, Rashid.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm terribly sorry to reopen the issue of dates for the Council, but the spring 2019 session, I think there's going to be a problem because it's going to coincide with the Eid celebrations for Muslims. So it will be a good idea to postpone. It'll be bang in the middle of the week that is going to be the height of the Eid festival. I've just checked on internet.
No, no, he's talking about this one, right? Oh, spring meeting?
Rashid, can I just ask you to clarify precisely which meeting you are referring to?
The first meeting, that's to say the spring meeting in 2019. You mentioned the 3-6 June 2019 for those dates.
A week later.
One week later, yeah.
Do we need to check? I think we better check one week.
Okay, you know what? We'll send a decision by May. We'll look into this and send a decision by May.
Thank you, Rashid. The Secretariat would want to just quickly review alternative dates. Initial thinking is possibly the following week, but the safest way to follow this up is to send a decision by mail once the Secretariat has properly looked at the international calendar. But your point is noted, and the Secretariat will very quickly follow up by mail with an alternative date. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. If you can just move it to the the following week, it will be okay, I think.
Yeah, but the point is that we also need to check around that if there are any conflicts on the other meetings, so we can't decide it now. We need to really look into it and check several things. So that's what we are proposing is a decision by mail. Hope it's okay. So, all right, now we are gracefully moving into the LDCF-SCCF meeting, and Peter will continue to co-chair and together with me. But then first, I officially would like to welcome to everybody in this room to this LDCF-SCCF Council meeting. I think we have already acknowledged a lot of an important fact for the last two days. We were really at a very critical moment of this Earth and the future of this Earth and the planet and its our people. I remember this Da Nang was actually quite flooded, even the last fall, that when they had an APEC meeting, and so that even that we see a lot of that wake-up call from nature all over the world, including this coastal cities in Da Nang and also the Hoi An. So that with this group, there is no need, I think, for us to remind ourselves that why this agenda is very important to you and to us. I also want to say one more thing, that for the last 6 months, and one thing which reminds me of our effort, of your effort, is that in December in Macron Summit, One Planet Summit they call, that there is an important actually session that which we all come together to showcase that what kind of things that we have been doing. And one of the projects that it was acknowledged really, really highly is this West Africa WACA project, which is utilized at its LDCF, and it really attracts that captures a lot of recognition, attention, and I would like to really thank you and thank countries that who really made a showcase to the world of your effort. I just would like to acknowledge it. So, and also that one more thing that why this important meeting is so important is that we continue to see the huge gap between demand and supply, and then with that kind of a very difficult situation, the team really would like to propose you a strategy for next 4 years, how we want to maximize the impact of that this limited resources, and how we really help up that this fund. So this is mostly the team has really done a very important effort together with many of you, how we could strategize this limited resources of the LDCF and SCCF for next 4 years. And we were proposing a kind of innovative ideas, the strategies, how to manage it. And so that's why I think this meeting was absolutely important. So please, and yeah, stay with us to really discuss that important issue. We have a quite a packed agenda, and we have a number of guests, and we would like to invite, and particularly we have actually the two significant the guests, and one is that LDC chair, the Gabole, and who could address us, and we also have a state minister from Ethiopia who could actually showcase to us that the project he has been doing. So first, I would like to acknowledge that LDC chair, and please and welcome Mr. Gabole. Floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, colleagues, council members, distinguished delegates and guests. I'm pleased to address you all at the this 24th LDCF-SCCF Council meeting. I'm honored to represent the least developed countries group and would like to thank the Council for their continued support to LDCs to tackling climate change through the LDCF. I would like to also to recognize and thank the government of Vietnam for the wonderful arrangement of this meeting. And colleagues, allow me also to acknowledge the able leadership and support being provided by His Excellency Turkari, State Minister of Environment and the Minister of Climate Change, Forest and in Ethiopia, for his able guidance and leadership during my chairmanship so far. I represent the 47 most vulnerable countries which are disproportionately affected by the adverse impacts of climate change and are least responsible for causing the problem in the first place. The impacts of climate change are clearly visible in LDCs, whether it's in the monsoon flooding in Nepal and Bangladesh last year, or the raging floods in East Africa in recent months, which affected millions of people and damaged critical economic infrastructure, causing loss of millions of dollars. The Least Developed Countries Fund has been a strong partner for LDCs in their efforts to tackle climate change, supporting more than 850 million people living in the LDCs. I would like to take the opportunity to acknowledge the voluntary contribution of nearly $95 million to the LDCF last year by Belgium, Germany, Sweden, and the Wallon region of Belgium. However, there is still a large gap in finance required to implement climate actions in LDCs, and the adequacy of LDCF remains a big challenge. Support required for the formulation and implementation of NAPA and NDCs are much more. Estimates suggest that $4 billion is still needed for implementation of urgent and immediate adaptation. Is called National Adaptation of Actions that were identified by LDCs nearly a decade ago. Assessment of LDCs NDC showed that the financial needs, as expressed by only 30 LDCs in their NDCs, those who provided cost estimation for adaptation needs amount to at least $216 billion. The full assessment of all LDCs NDC will account for much higher amounts. One of the key discussions today is on the programming strategy for the LDCF and CCF for the period of 2018 to 2022. This is a very important document that shapes the direction of the funds for the next 4 years. We had the opportunity to engage in the consultations on the strategy with donors and the GEF Secretariat at the last UNFCCC session. And we are pleased that some of our priorities, concerns, and suggestions have been discussed and addressed in this strategy. We also see the value of having some level of flexibility in the strategy to accommodate future arising needs resulting with advancement on the UNFCCC and the Paris Agreement negotiation process. We are pleased to see that the strategy includes operational improvements which will contribute to meeting the needs of LDCs going forward. We believe that it focuses on innovation, mainstreaming, and fostering enabling conditions in climate change adaptation will lead to effective and large-scale impact in LDCs. We ask for your continued support and commitment to address the urgent and immediate priorities of the LDCs to address climate change, and also for the LDCs to continue to make our contributions for the Paris Agreement. Over time, LDCF has built a great trust with the LDCs. However, over the past decade, even though some LDCs have worked to build their institutional capacities and experiences to utilize the LDCF, many of our countries still face difficulties in effectively and efficiently accessing resources. I am certain that the LDCs will rely on funds coming through the LDCF to address some of these difficulties, as the LDCF is our own fund, and we do not have to compete with other countries to receive funds. In addition, to bring a dedicated source of funding for LDCs, the LDCF could be a source of support to help LDCs address LDC-related challenges and priorities, so that LDCs can access funding from the GCF and other channels. As we move ahead, it's important that the LDCF is in its operational policy improvements address such challenges and build lasting institutional capacity of LDCs by working closely with their respective countries. The LDCF, with its mandate to serve the Paris Agreement, should work towards further streamlining and simplifying the application and approval process as required by the Paris Agreement. As the new strategy highlights, this foundation in the LDCs is very important for the success of future investments and interventions in our countries by other partners, including the GCF and bilateral institutions. Partnerships among financing entities have the potential to mutually enhance effectiveness and impact, and offer more sustainable solutions to the LDCs and other countries. The LDCF should also take lessons from the direct access modalities of the Adaptation Fund and the GCF and explore options on how LDCs could access funding directly from the LDCF. This is critical for LDCs as it enhances in-country capacity and country ownership. I also take the opportunity to highlight the importance of SCF, which is aimed at supporting innovation in tackling adaptation challenges. With some LDCs set for graduation, we need a strong SCF commitment from donors to continue to address challenges for graduating LDCs. We don't need them to come back to this group, as we all aim to graduate soon. I would like to conclude by highlighting the importance of the LDCF as the only dedicated fund to address climate change challenges of LDCs. We remain committed to make best use of the resource mobilized through this fund. I request donors to fulfill your commitment under the Paris Agreement and provide predictable, scaled up, and long-term funds through the LDCF to support climate change adaptation in LDCs and help the fund to operate effectively now and in the post-2020 period. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gowley. I'd like to open the floor if you have any comments and questions or reflections. If not, let us move on to the next item. But thank you so much, Gowley. It was really nice to hear directly from you. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you, Naoko. Next item on the agenda is a project showcase. And with that, I have the great pleasure to invite His Excellency Mr. Atokare Chawicha Debasa, State Minister from Ministry of the Environment and Climate Change in Ethiopia, to give us a presentation. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, Council members, distinguished delegates, guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am honored to present the very first program or showcase of least developing countries fund to the Council. Today I am here to introduce a highly innovative and effective project on the Sustainable Land Management Program, implemented in Ethiopia with support of GEF and the LDCF. Over the 2/3 of Ethiopian population live in rural areas on agriculture. Although we are least developing country, still we are making substantial progress on social human development over the past nearly 2 decades. The GDP of Ethiopia has doubled in the past 5 years. Our growth has been supported by agriculture, dominated by small-scale rural farmers. However, our socio-economic development is threatened by the risk of climate change causing massive floods and droughts across our farmlands, compounded by challenges of climate change, fragility of soil, poor agricultural practices are worsening land degradation. That will become even worse in the future without enhanced action taken by the country. Ladies and gentlemen, for our sustainable future, we are committed to take innovative approaches to reduce vulnerability and to increase resilience to the adverse impacts of climate change. Please allow me to present the Sustainable Land Management Program, which has spearheaded efforts in Ethiopia to address the consequences of climate change, land degradation, deforestation, and the loss of biodiversity. The program is part of the Great Green Wall initiative implemented in 12 countries across Africa, implemented in collaboration with World Bank since 2013. The program is supporting rural communities in Ethiopia to implement the climate-smart agriculture. The results are located impact to date are impressive. I am very pleased that this program is contributing to restoring 500,000 hectares of degraded land by implementing soil rehabilitation and water conservation interventions. It is building climate resilience in communities with participation of farmers, with direct benefits to thousands of households in 6 regions of Ethiopia. Ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by expressing my appreciation to the Council and the GEF for your support to this program through LDCF and the GEF Trust Fund. As an only dedicated fund to support adaptation actions among LDCs, the LDCF plays a unique catalytic role to accelerate adaptation actions with benefits for the most vulnerable population around the globe. Ethiopia is committed to continue partner with the GEF and LDCF to address global sustainability concerns with local actions. Now the short film will follow, give you a glimpse of transformation happening in Ethiopia, villages and the landscapes with the LDCF support. I hope you enjoy short visual trip to Ethiopia. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency, and I think a 3-minute video should play now, please.
Il faut qu'on crée un rêve africain. Les Américains ont leur rêve américain, il faut que nous on crée un rêve africain qui fait que les jeunes peuvent se créer une vie avec un avenir ici. Ça c'est vraiment très important.
Je voyage le long du Sahel parce qu'il y a un projet qui s'appelle la Grande Muraille Verte. L'idée, c'est vraiment d'avoir des gens qui retrouvent du travail et qui retrouvent aussi des endroits où ils peuvent cultiver et la terre devient à nouveau fertile.
We will keep on fighting, the light is coming.
We're hoping that as African, we can make it here. We can change our continent. We can change our destiny.
Africa, yeah. Africa, yeah. Africa, yeah.
Birkoiraga faraga baraga zargani kwirano. Birkoiraga faraga baraga zargani kwirano.
On pense à certains murs dont on a entendu parler qui divisent les gens. Et ça, c'est un mur qui réunit les gens. De voir l'Afrique ensemble, main dans la main pour quelque chose comme ça, qui va aussi aider la planète, va être spectaculaire.
Africa, yeah. Africa, yeah. Africa, yeah.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you for giving us an exclusive look at that trailer. It's remarkably inspiring, and we take a lot of strength from that. So thank you again on behalf of the Council.
Thank you so much. So let us move on to the next agenda item. As I mentioned, we now want to present the next 4 years programming strategy for LDCF and SCCF, and which has been quite an exercise for the last, actually the half year, which involved many people, but please, let's have a good discussion. It's absolutely important for the future of those two funds. Gustavo, please.
Good morning again. It's a tremendous pleasure to be able to present to you the proposed programming strategy for the adaptation, on adaptation for the climate change on LDCF and SCCF, and also some proposed operational improvements that could help delivery on both funds. The GEF initiated for this strategy a consultation process at the 23rd LDCF-SCCF Council meeting last November. And 3 consultation meetings followed to discuss a draft, and they were held in April and May with key donors and key recipient countries, including the group of LDCs. In parallel, we also undertook a technical review with adaptation experts, as well as many climate change adaptation funds and key GEF agencies. The final version was posted externally a month ago, and I hope you had a chance to take a look at it. The overarching goal of the strategy, I'm not sure why the presentation is not showing, aligns with the Paris Agreement, and it's to strengthen the resilience and to reduce vulnerability to the adverse effects of climate change in developing countries, and support the efforts to enhance adaptive capacity Yes, that's good. Some critical elements for us as we develop the strategy in response to requests emerging from the recent council meetings include the following. The first is to ensure that the LDCF and SCCF are complementary and not competing or duplicating the work with other adaptation funds. The strategy is also geared to help LDCF and SCCF diversify the range of adaptation finance options available to the beneficiary countries. The strategy also introduces and enhances focus on private sector engagement, both in terms of its ability to contribute to adaptation and its ability to benefit from adaptation measures. The SCCF in particular is expected to play a greater role in this field. We are also striving, as the chair of LDCF group described to you this morning, for greater innovation and impact. And to be more strategic and in line with our corporate direction, we placed great emphasis on gender equality and as a special aspect of vulnerability reduction. The strategy builds on the comparative advantages of these funds and of the GEF at large. They have extensive experience supporting adaptation at the national and regional levels, as well as the global scale, which at present most adaptation funds do not. GEF also brings the experience supporting multiple conventions and focal areas to help guide and lend technical support for developing adaptation solutions that can offer multiple benefits across conventions. The focus on innovation is in the new strategy emerges from a highly successful experience thus far with the SCCF, which has been independently evaluated as an ideal incubator for testing new concepts. And as the world's longest running global publicly funded adaptation program with a portfolio of 330 adaptation projects that have been assessed as being highly effective, impactful, and offer good value for money, it's important that we start a new era learning from this past experience and building on it. We'll now have a quick look at the proposed strategic objectives and the entry points for the implementation of the LDCF in particular. Then we get to the SCCF. The first objective is to reduce vulnerability and increase resilience through the innovation and technology transfer for climate change adaptation. For this, the fund will finance measures in priority sectors identified by the LDCs and their respective NAPAs, and aiming to deliver adaptation solutions that can offer greater impact and engage a broader range of partners. Other categories include climate security, which focuses on fragile states, and support to incubate new adaptation technologies. The second objective is to mainstream climate change adaptation and resilience for systemic impact, including for countries that are interested in projects under the GEF-7 integrated programs. The funds will also explore how broader partnerships can enable countries to use them more effectively in conjunction with other sources of adaptation and non-adaptation finance. Finally, the third objective is to foster enabling conditions for effective and integrated climate change adaptation, for which we continue to support that process in the LDC work program and enabling activities. Now, going directly into the SCCF, I want to start by quickly reviewing the value of SCCF and why it is important to maintain and actively resource this fund, which hasn't been much of the case in recent years. First, small island developing states are extremely vulnerable to sea level rise and other adverse impacts of climate change. And of the 38 UN designated SIDS, only 9 are eligible for LDCF support. Hence, the SCCF comes as a critical resource for quick and cost-effective programming for the majority of the SIDS. Furthermore, some LDCs are starting to graduate from LDC status, and though they remain quite vulnerable to climate change impacts, and they will no longer be able to access LDCF funds as per current rules of access. They are now turning to the SCCF instead. The SCCF has also been quite challenged in the past couple of years because of a low and unpredictable funding. And in the recent past, our average funding approvals are only in the order of $6 million per year. The SCCF shares some of the three strategic objectives with the LDCF, but it does have different entry points. First, to stimulate innovation, the strategy introduces a challenge program which would be open for competition to support entrepreneurs in these countries in the adaptation and climate resilience space. The GEF already has experience in managing challenge programs for innovation through its climate change mitigation focal area under the GEF Trust Fund, which have proven very successful. Similar to the LDCF, the SCCF will also support adaptation mainstreaming in key vulnerable sectors in developing countries. It will also support enabling activities in response to COP guidance in vulnerable non-LDC countries. Recent example is the SCCF support to the Global Support Program for NAPAs in non-LDCs. The new strategy calls for both the LCCF and the SCCF to engage with the private sector in a much greater scale than it has happened in the past. The intent is to harness the potential of private sector actors to reduce vulnerability to climate change, as well as to support their own efforts to build adaptive capacity. The emphasis will be on supporting local private sector actors, particularly micro, small, and medium enterprises, and will try to develop and test adaptation approaches with potential to scale up cooperation with other climate finance mechanisms such as the Green Climate Fund. I will now address quickly some operational improvements that we are proposing emerging from the discussions and consultations that were held over the past 3 or 4 months. For the GEF-7, the strategy calls for projects to be designed in a more strategic manner by adhering to criteria such as alignment with country needs and adaptation priorities, alignment with LDCF and SCCF programming strategies. Thirdly, opportunities to catalyze additional support from the larger impactful programming, and at the level LDCF resource that a country has already accessed. Additional factors that we may consider are the potential for private sector engagement, geographic balance, the timing of technical approval, which in other words means whether an agency has a board approval date coming up for a project, and sometimes we miss the boat because the project cycle is not at the same time frame, and whether the adaptation project is part of a multi-trust fund project that needs to be presented for approval to an upcoming council meeting and such. So trying to be a bit more pragmatic in terms of prioritizing projects for funding in work programs. In our early drafts, in our consultations, we presented a range of options for LDCF project approval that range from approval on a rolling basis, which is the practice so far, approval on a basis of a strategic prioritized work program, similar to what we have now for the GEF Trust Fund and for the SCCF. And as a result of these discussions, most stakeholders expressed preference for a strategically prioritized work program, and that's what we are proposing in the draft strategy that you have before you. And in our consultations with the LDCs themselves, we didn't note any objections in this regard. The LDCF has had an informal per country ceiling in place that tends to rise when the volume of contributions allows. And the ceiling is currently at $40 million per LDCs. 7 LDCs have reached that ceiling already, and several others are past the $20 million mark. We are thus proposing that we raise the ceiling in GEF-7 to $50 million per country. And in the interest of ensuring that all LDCs have a chance to access the LDCF in GEF-7, which is a consideration that was important to our donors as well as to recipient countries, we are proposing each country can access up to $10 million in LDCF support during GEF-7. Should contributions to the LDCF be of a volume that enables us to raise the ceiling further, we may raise that cap as well. Support to regional and global initiatives is a unique feature of the LDCF as well as SCCF. Both funds have provided value by supporting regional and global initiatives, number one, to build capacity and facilitate cross-learning in response to COP guidance, and secondly, to foster innovation and private sector engagement with significant adaptation and de-risking potential for all developing countries. Examples of such support include 2 phases of the Global Support Program for the NAPS and the private sector-oriented CRAFT program that was approved last year. On the pipeline management, a big question has been how to manage it. The pipeline comprises of projects that were developed 1 or 2 years ago, which may no longer be relevant for the country, or they may not bring high strategic value at this stage in time. We discussed this matter at length during our consultations, and the consensus was not to abandon the pipeline entirely, but to work with countries and agencies to see how they would like to see LDCF resources used most effectively and strategically, either by updating the pipeline or reworking the project in some cases, or submitting a new proposal that can substitute the pipeline that exists. In terms of the SCCF modalities and the SCCF Climate Change Challenge Program that I mentioned before, the Council can determine what the threshold for SCCF contribution should be to trigger a call for proposals. The Secretariat would then screen and pre-select concepts and invite complete proposals for those that meet the best criteria. And the incentives for mainstreaming adaptation and resilience would be managed outside of the pre-selection modality and aligned with the regular GEF Trust Fund cycle, as all projects are expected to follow their regular cycle. And these proposed improvements to the SCCF programming modalities respond directly to the needs articulated and the requests for more flexible mechanisms to support innovative approaches in climate finance. So this is my last slide, and I thank you all. And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the presentation. Now I would like to open the floor for your comments, reflection. Kojura, please.
Well, let me start by thanking the LDC chair and Honorable State Minister from Ethiopia for their interventions at the beginning of this session, giving us some insight in the challenges of LDCs confronted with climate change. Germany continues to be committed to the LDCF, and which has been underlined by our new contribution, which was announced at the COP and which is valid for 2017 and 2018 of 50 million euros. We have been very pleased with the work the LDCF has been doing on the revision of its climate change adaptation strategy for the coming years, and with the new strategic objectives. We welcome especially welcome the proposal for the adjustments in the project selection and approval process for the LDCF, which we believe will be beneficial for LDCs in terms of more certainty and shorter duration of the LDCF processes and improve effectiveness. And we would somehow like to encourage the LDCF when it's engaging with the private sector in LDCs, not to lose sight of the LDCF's core target group of vulnerable poor, and therefore firstly comprise local private actors, medium and small enterprises that can constructively contribute to adaptation ambitions. Positive examples in this context that are interfaces to climate risk and security from previous work programs, including climate risk insurance projects or projects working on early warning systems in cooperation with private partners in the telecommunications industry. We also welcome the expanded reference to mainstream climate change adaptation and resilience considerations throughout the broader GEF programming, as only such a holistic and cross-cutting approach will be able to yield transformational change throughout the climate finance sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Kojura. May I call on Marrete, followed by Stefan.
Thank you very much. Let me just say, it says Norway here. Norway is not a party to LDCF or contributing. So I just want to emphasize that I'm representing Denmark, in case anyone would be in doubt. And I would like to echo Cordula's thanks to the wonderful scene setter we had this morning. I think it was very good to get a reminder of why are we here, why are we having this particular fund in place. We, from the Danish side, is very committed to the LDCF. We find that it's an excellent avenue to really reach the poorest countries and the poorest in the poorest countries. And we find that is an excellent avenue also to address poverty and climate in a context where it's actually realized by people on the ground. So that scene setter was really great for us. Also, I want to confirm that Denmark is a continued strong supporter to the LDCF. We have not contributed since the last time because we're still paying on the current contribution. We have another tranche to go this year, and then we'll see what happens. And thank you for the new strategy. I think we can echo others which has been expressing in the consultations that it is a good strategy that embrace some of the new agendas, the private sector, the gender, the security, thinking about the countries in fragility. It's also very well reflecting the complementarity with other funds. So all in all, we are quite happy with it. I should say, though, that we are particularly happy with the objective 1 of the strategy. We are a little bit less enthusiastic about some of the objectives around spending LDCF money to mainstream adaptation in the broader GEF portfolio. We have expressed that opinion before. I think we are alone on that, so we take that point, but it's just to say that we are particularly happy with objective 1 and the innovation and the approach that you are outlining in objective 1. A few other points. On the new approach to distribution of funds and choice of projects, etc. I think we are with the rest of the LDCF family supporting that change. On the other hand, we also feel that we perhaps are still a little bit in doubt about how does this pan out in practice? How do we use those criteria listed, those strategic considerations for priorities? How exactly will that be implemented? Are we doing yes, no assessments? Are we doing ranking, or how will we use those criteria in practice? And I know we are talking a strategy now, but it will be good eventually to know a little bit more about how in practice will you use those criteria, and how do we make sure that we all are in agreement around how we work with this. This will be new for us, so it's quite important to really understand if you're good at one, will that then even out that you are bad on another, or how do we go about this in practice? Will we get the very best, or how will we use those criteria? The other thing that we have also asked about, which is perhaps again a little bit of a detail, but still quite important, is how will the budget be distributed across the objectives, and also in particularly how will it be spent on the regional global programs versus the more national approaches, such as the NAPAs, etc. And how much will go for actual mainstreaming of adaptation into the larger GEF portfolio? How much of the LDCF budget will go for that? So I know that it will not be a detailed distribution across objectives, but I think it is quite important for us as who are investing in the LDCF to understand really how much is going for the groundwork in the countries, for the NAPAs, for the implementation of these new strategic projects, and how much are spent on things that are conceptualized elsewhere, not at the country level necessarily. I think I will end with that. I have one more thing that we have discussed a number of times. I just want to mention it again. The whole definition of resilience. We agree with the objective. We are looking at resilience, we are looking at adaptive capacity, we are looking at reducing vulnerabilities. But all of those things are not exactly the same. They are all mentioned in the overall objective, which is fine. But I think we need at some point also in the LDCF family, as I would call it, have a little bit of a discussion around what do we mean by creating resilience, because resilience is a very broad concept, and it is everything from bouncing back better to simply reduce vulnerability. So the ambition, how high is our ambition on this, and how does it relate to broader resilience, not just to climate change? I think that is a discussion that is good to have. Maybe we can also get help from the scientific technical advisory board on this. Thank you very much. Strong support to the strategy.
Thank you so much for great encouragement, great support. May I call on Stefan, followed by May.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. Along the statements of the previous two colleagues, we're also supportive of the LDCF and the SCCF, and the two presentations that we had, the two testimonials I would call them this morning, show really well the specificity of these two funds, and how they are very critical, especially for the LDCs. We welcome the programming strategy. The strategy reflects findings of the Independent Evaluation Office, and also the proposals and discussions that called for a more strategic approach rather than the project by project. Also the way the pipeline was cleaned up, reflecting the country's priorities and in line with the GEF priorities and strategies. We note that the programming strategy gives much greater role to the private sector. And in line with Merete, we understand the role of the private sector here as being particularly oriented towards the local private sector for the reasons that she mentioned. With a stronger engagement of the local private sector, we will also get more poverty reduction and engagement at local level. We note, or it's a question, we noted that there's a list of projects or countries that submitted projects, and some of them received resources and some did not. So the question from our side is, what about those countries that have technically cleared, submitted projects, but did not receive funds because of lack of funds in the pot? What's the procedure? Will they have to resubmit, or will they just be next in line? We have a few of our constituency countries on that list, and would be pleased to be able to answer if they ask the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Stefan. May I call on May, followed by Marita?
Merci.
Thank you, Chair. I shall try to be brief, since what I have to say is aligned with what has just been said by others. I do thank the Secretariat for this strategy, in particular in respect of consultations and transparency in the process. This morning I also noted that the chair of LDCs referred to the very high participation of beneficiary countries in the consultation. Since we're talking a lot about ownership by beneficiary countries, this is indeed a crucial ingredient in terms of climate change adaptation. There's also lots of material in the document on coordination and complementarity with other funds. References made chiefly to the Green Climate Fund, but there's also the Adaptation Fund. This was mentioned in the interventions. Nerete, I would like to tell you that you're not alone in terms of wondering how the money is used for the LDC funds in terms of mainstreaming the theme. But if this is what recipient countries want, fine with me. As regards the option offered here in option 6 for the selection approval of projects, that seems to us to be the best, with perhaps a slight nuance. Perhaps it's not necessary to have intercession decisions on projects, since we are told that we have rather we have more projects than resources to finance these projects. Also, further down, it would be a good idea to have more details in terms of selection criteria. As regards the private sector, I agree with what Marite and Stefan said. And I'd like to say once again that we do appreciate very much the fact that the LDCF is focused on grant money. And perhaps in the next session we'll talk about this further, but there is an effort, as for GEF in general, in terms of sustainability of projects for improvement purposes, and this is especially true in terms of climate change adaptation projects. Thank you.
Thank you, May. May I call on Marita, followed by Jos from UK.
Thank you, Chair. I will address both this point and next point in my comments. But first, I would like to thank you for the very interesting presentation on the Ethiopia project. We welcome the important work by the LDCF in supporting developing countries in the preparation and implementation of NAPs. And we would very much like to see additional donor funding to the fund. We can announce at this meeting that we expect to provide an additional contribution this year of 50 million Swedish crowns, which is in addition to the 85 million that we announced, Swedish crowns that is, that we announced already at the COP23 for this year. Coming back to the strategy, we support the proposal, including the recommended approach to strengthen pipeline management, and we welcome the possibility to participate in the consultations that were arranged by LDCF. And we are also very pleased that many of our comments were taken on board. We are particularly pleased that the proposed strategy offers a broad perspective that takes into account the role, value added, and effectiveness of the LDCF and SCCF in the multilateral climate finance architecture. And this is especially relevant with regard to GCF, and it's very clear from the strategy your thoughts on how you intend to go forward the next steps. We think this is extremely important so that we can use scarce resources much more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you so much. May I call on Jos from UK, followed by Jos from Belgium.
Thank you very much. Let me begin by thanking the Secretariat and the LDC Chair. I'm grateful to you both for the presentations, bringing it together. LDCF and SCCF have been pathfinders in this. As Gustavo said, it's the oldest continuous time series on this subject. And this new strategy, to our view, continues that contribution to leadership in thinking about theory of change and the way forward. And this reflects an evolution from the early days when there was really nothing happening, and these were pilots almost in the dark, to the situation where you're now talking about mainstreaming, and the implication that we are already collectively standing on the shoulders of the first of these projects, because we're now in a position to be discussing mainstreaming, whereas at the beginning that was out of the question. So it's good that you are keeping abreast of the debate in this document and continuing to contribute to that thought leadership. It's also good that you're focusing on complementarity now, and again, you now have other entities with which to be complementary, there having been none in the beginning. And the joint lesson learning you've referred to, I'd highlight what the PPCR is doing with its CIF plus 10 this year as an important body of experience, which in the minds of the UK advisors anyway, was built in part on this early experience. So it's a thumbs up to your continuing contribution to thought leadership in the subject, and thanks again.
Thank you so much. May I call on Jos from Belgium?
Thank you, and I can be brief after listening to all the comments. But first of all, thank for the especially for the consultation, the consultative process. I think that was very well done. Not that all our points were taken up, but anyway, we agree with the strategy. But and thanks to the speakers of this morning, that was very interesting. So just to say that we can support this strategy. Wish you all the luck. I think the options there for the project cycle and so it's all well described, and I do want to join basically the ladies at the other end of the table there, Merete and May. To say that to Merete that you got two supporters on the mainstreaming, little doubt there, and join her with reflections on the distribution of funds, and we'll see how that goes. I mean, at the same time, it's country driven, so there we will see where the emphasis lies from the recipient ones. And also, I do appreciate that. I mean, there was a lot of, at the very beginning at least, there was a lot of emphasis on innovation, and that's been tempered a bit. And I think, I mean, I agree, particularly in the LDCF part. I mean, it's still there for NAPA implementation, NAP process implementation, and innovation is a tool. It should not be an objective. If you can do things better in a new way, fine. If you doubt with the few resources that we have, you better play on safe. and so that, but that has been incorporated, and the rest are probably some details. We will keep, of course, a close eye on this, as we intend to continue supporting the LDCF at least, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Jules. I think we hear from all of you with flag up. So let us respond to the very, very important observations and questions.
Well, thank you very much for your strong support to the proposed strategy. I think you also posed some important questions that we couldn't entirely flesh out in the strategy in terms of the operational aspects, because we're waiting for this decision to then figure out how we implement it in practice. Given that the consensus was to proceed with these reforms while also maintaining some of the principles of the past, such as leave no country behind and attend to all LDCs, while at the same time looking for a more strategic approach to project financing. We'll need to, I think, learn as we go along, and since this is going to be through work programs, we'll be able to provide you with the rationale on how these criteria that we have been introducing in this strategy with your support are being applied in practice. And to be frank, it's hard to say before we start actually doing that. The other point that one of you pointed out is that this continues to be country-driven, and I think the dialogue with the countries will continue to be as important as ever. And to Stefan's question about the pipeline, in our engagement in consultations, we heard from all of them that they would like to decide on how they want to handle their own pipeline, if they want to do that. If they want to continue with the projects that they have cleared, but in variable lengths of time, let's discuss with them and with the agency, is this the best investment? Is this the best value for money or not? And if it is a question of adjustments, let's do that. If it's a question of let's leave this behind and look for something that it's a much higher priority, we'll do that. But we won't do that on our own. We'll do that with them and with the agencies. Just anything else that okay, can you talk about the funds?
Thank you. Just to add on the question of indicative financing scenarios across different objectives, we did put a table in the strategy which sort of highlights two different scenarios for which we would see the allocation of resources. But as Gustavo, as well as a number of council members already pointed out, ultimately this is going to be decided on what countries themselves would want. So this is purely at this point indicative, which is somewhat similar to how we do the indicative scenarios of budget allocation in the GEF Trust Fund. Oh yes, and there was a question on the resource allocation for the global and regional type initiatives versus the national. And in the strategy, we specify the amounts of resources that could go into the regional global would be somewhat modest and capped at 10%. And we do believe that amount should enable us to address needs that are better addressed through the regional global, as well as any COP guidance items that would necessitate us to program resources in the regional global manner. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope we answered to all the questions raised. With that, may I invite you to take the decision? Thank you so much. I think decision adopted, and I really would like to thank once more that for your very heartful consideration and this collaboration and support for this strategy, because it really involves a lot of effort from your side, from our side, and I hope this strategy will really pave the new way of doing business. Thank you so much. So with that, let's move on to the next item. It's a progress report. So, Cheese.
Thank you, Madam Co-Chair. On behalf of the Secretariat, I would like to present the progress report of the Least Developed Countries Fund and the Special Climate Change Fund. The report describes the progress made in the operations of the LDCF and SCCF since their inception, and specifically during the period from October 2017 to the end of May of 2018. Can you go back? Thank you. I'm going to give you a snapshot of the LDC financial summary first. As of April 30th, 2018, cumulative pledges to the LDCF amounted to approximately $1.33 billion. Of the resources pledged, 95% or $1.27 billion have been paid. And during the reporting period, there were new pledges to the LDCF amounting to approximately $95 million. In the near term, the demand for the LDCF resources continues to exceed the funds available for new approvals. As of April 30th, 2018, funds available for the new funding decision amounted to approximately $90 million, whereas April 2018, resources amounting to $157 million were sought for 21 full-size projects that have been technically cleared by the Secretariat. An additional $92 million was sought towards 11 project proposals that had been endorsed by the country's operational focal points and formally submitted. And I should point out, of the $90 million funds available for new approvals, there are 5 additional proposals that are being circulated to Council for approval, and the deadline for the non-objection approval is actually today. So as of close of business, if those are approved, additional 5 projects amounting to $30 million ought to also be approved by the LDCF. Funding approvals. As of April 30th, 50 LDCs had access total of $1.237 billion for 207 projects in support of the implementation of the NAPAs. This includes 3 global projects with LDCF resources amounting to approximately $14 million. That had been approved to support the preparation of the National Adaptation Plan process in the LDCs and the implementations of elements of the LDC work programs other than NAPAs. During the reporting period, $48 million have been allocated for the LDCF to projects approved by the LDCF-SCCF Council. Next, please. Here is a snapshot of expected results of projects approved and endorsed, and these are the cumulative numbers from the beginning of the LDCF. And this table gets updated every 6 months or so that you get the most updated snapshots. I'm not going to go through all the numbers, but just wanted to highlight that the projects that the LDCF is supporting are directly reducing the vulnerability of more than 20 million people. And given the mandate of the LDCF to support the preparation of the NAP process in LDCs, 80 LDCF projects are already supporting countries in their efforts to integrate climate change adaptation into 210 national development policies, plans, and frameworks. And the LDCF projects are also assisting countries in laying the groundwork for climate resilience development through 82 projects that will enable LDCs to strengthen their national hydro, met, and climate information services, which are identified as key priorities by many countries. Next, please. Now we want to present a very quick snapshot of the financial summary as well as achievements of the SCCF. As of April 30th, 2018, cumulative pledges to the SCCF amounted to $352 million, reflecting a pledge of $536 million from Switzerland during the reporting period. Of the total resources, almost all of it, 99%, has already been paid. As of the same date, a total of $349.8 million have been approved for 78 projects under the SCCF. This reflects one project that was recently approved by the CEO during this reporting period for $1.1 million. Of the total resources approved, $289 million were for 7 projects under the SCCF adaptation program, which is window A, with the remainder approved under SCCF program for technology transfer, which is window B, with a total grant resources amounting to $61 million. Next, please. Again, the expected results, we don't actually see a lot of movement here because of the speed of programming, but also wanted to highlight that the direct beneficiaries is amounting to 6.9 million people through the cumulative investments as well as support provided by the SCCF. In addition, 33 SCCF projects are already supporting 50 countries in their efforts to integrate climate change adaptation into 140 national development policies, plans, and frameworks. Next, please. Next. It's okay. Next one. Yeah. Since we had an occasion to hear from the Ethiopian minister, I'm not going to highlight a project from the LDCF, but also wanted to just provide a very quick snapshot of the SCCF project example. This is called the CRAFT, the first private sector climate resilience and adaptation fund for developing countries. The CEO talked about during the One Planet Summit in December, our initiative in West Africa, coastal areas. The WACA program was highly touted as a very good initiative. Another initiative that got a lot of attention was this one called the CRAFT, which is actually trying to mobilize the private sector engagement in having adaptation technologies as well as private sector entities. And the project aims to establish and mobilize resources for the first private sector climate resilience and adaptation investments fund, as well as the technical assistance facility for developing countries. It's going to directly benefit more than 100,000 people, train quite a number of people on conducting climate risk assessments and other climate resilience products and services. I think this project might also be highlighted during roundtable on conservation finance. Is it tomorrow or the day after? So you can actually get a lot more information on how this project is being progressed right now. So next. So with that, that's the very quick update from our side on the progress report. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. So let me open the floor for any comments or reflections. If not, I formally would like to thank Sweden for additional contribution to the LDCF, that in addition to many other donors which have always supported the LDCF-SCCF. So, Peter.
Thank you, Naoko. Moving on, we're going to take the next two items together, 7 and 8. So the financial year 17 annual monitoring review of the LDCF-SCCF and the annual evaluation reports. First, may I pass back to Gustavo.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Peter. Can you put the presentation up, please? What's that one? So just to introduce while the presentation is being uploaded, I would like to, on behalf of the Secretariat, introduce the document on the annual monitoring review of the LDCF and SCCF, which describes the performance and the results and lessons learned from the portfolio of projects financed under both funds that had begun implementation on or before June 30 of 2016, and that were still under implementation during at least part of the fiscal year 2017. We also provide more information on management effectiveness and efficiency of investments from both funds. The GEF Secretariat received reports for 88 LDCF projects, and the funding commitments towards the active portfolio, including grants, agency fees, and PPGs, amount to a little over $500 million. Of the projects that in grants committed, $192 million, or 43%, have been already disbursed. 86% of the LDCF projects in the active portfolio were rated moderately satisfactory or above in terms of their progress towards implementation objectives, and 87% rated moderately satisfactory or above to their implementation progress. On achieved results as of June 30, 2017, the 88 projects contained in the portfolio reached more than 4.4 million direct beneficiaries and trained 358,000 people in various aspects of climate change adaptation. An estimated 1.5 million hectares of land have been brought under more resilience management through this investment, and 48 regional, national, and sector-wide policies, plans, and frameworks in 21 LDCs have been strengthened or developed to better address climate change risks and adaptation. And 31 projects had enhanced climate change information services that benefited 27 LDCs. Under the SCCF, we received reports for 36 projects. The total commitment, including project grants, fees, and PPGs, amounted to 143 million. And of the project grants committed, 48 million, 38% have been dispersed. On SCCF performance, 97% of the SCCF projects in the portfolio received development objective and implementation progress ratings of moderately satisfactory or higher to 97%. On achievement of results for the SCCF, 36 projects reviewed reached more than 1.6 direct beneficiaries and trained 48,000 people. And in the course of doing that, 5.5 million hectares of land have been brought under more resilient management. And moreover, 101 regional, national, and sector-wide policies or frameworks in 9 countries were strengthened to better address climate change risks. And this is my last slide, just to call your attention to some of the lessons learned, which are quite interesting, particularly going forward as we discussed the strategy just now. First, index-based climate insurance seems to be, although it's not a panacea, seems to be more effective and more efficient than traditional crop insurance, which enable faster payouts sometimes even through a cell phone, and success even with limited budgets. The second lesson, I think it's self-evident, I would assume, which unclear execution arrangements and lack of high-level political buy-in are really impediments for progress support on the ground. Thirdly, pilot climate change technology network and finance centers can make important contributions to the mobilization of climate finance, particularly through business incubators and the clean tech venture capital. Next one is the question of influx of refugees in our recipient countries while projects are being implemented. Often require severe restructuring of projects during implementation to adjust for that new factor. Projects that contain components and outcomes specifically devoted to addressing vulnerability of women are more likely to be a strong example of promoting gender equality. And finally, the national executing partner's ability to meet financial management requirements, particularly in LDCs, can be a definitive factor influencing the project timeline, disbursement of resources, and success on the ground. With that, Peter, I turn the floor back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gustavo. Any comments or observations on the presentation? Cordula, please.
Well, thank you very much for this interesting presentation of the results of the annual evaluation. As already said by Marita before, we are also a bit concerned about the still insufficient level of, from our point of view, still insufficient level of sustainability of projects as we are in the GEF as a whole. And I wonder, well, with the findings of your evaluation, if there would not be elements that you could include in the criteria for the selection of the projects that might, in the end, help you with getting better results in sustainability.
Thank you, Cordula. Miret, please. followed by Marita.
Thank you very much. I always highly appreciate this particular part of the meeting, because this is where we hear about actual results, not just projected results. And it's very exciting to hear the stories also about what has been influential factors for success or failure, and always this very good storyline also about private sector and gender and how those particular issues are covered in the projects. So one of the things I want to say is that we do believe that this kind of reporting and the actual results is something that we in general should perhaps pay more attention to, and also in the case of LDCF, perhaps even move to do more on. We don't have a scorecard as such for LDCF. We have a scorecard for GEF. Is it an opportunity to do more in terms of publicizing in a very easy way some key data and perhaps even some few lessons learned, etc., which is not in a very heavy report, but it's something we could bring to some of the decision makers on our respective sites and draw some attention to, because I think there's a lot of good lessons here. So what I take from it, I think there are good lessons, as I said, on private sector, clearly opportunities for private sector, even in adaptation and LDCs, which we often hear is a very difficult area, and others are struggling with. So I thought also, just like Gustavo mentioned, the insurance case was a very interesting one. Also that we have good success when there's a good buy-in, when there's a very predictable environment. This also tells us then what do we need to do in terms of addressing enabling environment and creating that very conducive situation where everyone are ready and have bought into the project when it's supposed to start. And what do we do now when we move into perhaps also the security aspect, the fragility aspect? How do we address that a little better so that we make sure we create good outcomes? I think I'll end it at that, but welcome the report overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Marat. Marita, please.
Thank you, Chair. I can be very brief. I have two questions. Well, first, I would like to welcome the good results and request more information on why the results still seem to have, still good, but it's still we have a question on why it has deteriorated for the LDCF from the previous period, from 95% of moderately satisfactory projects to 86%. And at the same time, it has improved for SCCF. So that's one question. And my second question is also why we don't see more progress. This really relates to the next point, but in the interest of time, I'm trying to address it now. But why we still don't see so much progress on gender mainstreaming in LDCF? I think this point needs to improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Marita. On the second of those, would you prefer a quick answer now, or should we wait until we've had the evaluation? We'll wait. Okay. So, Gustavo, if you could possibly just address a couple of those points, and Marita's second we'll leave for the next element.
Thank you, Peter, and thanks for those who provided comments. I think what I got from the overall comments is that we need to be able to use these lessons learned in a much more operational way, so that as we move to a more strategic pipeline, these lessons can be fully incorporated into the programming process. We'll make sure that we do a better job in doing that and bringing these lessons forward. On presenting results and the lessons in a more comprehensive way, we'll try to look into what we can do additional to what we normally do, present for you on every 6 months. As you recall, I think maybe a year and a half ago, we presented a full-blown document that described the experience with both funds that summarized a lot of those lessons, but we can but that was, I think, very heavy, as you mentioned, Marite, and maybe we can find a better way to do that. On the question of fluctuation of ratings that Marita brought up, I can take a deeper look into this, but these ratings tend to fluctuate because the sample of projects is very small. It's like, going through with a film across the board, and every time you go to the next square, things have changed a little bit, but it's not reflective of the entire portfolio from over a certain time period. But I think we can look at that over a longer term period, see if we detect any deterioration on that. And the same way, I would love to conclude that we have improved on SCCF, but again, the sample size is very small, so that result is welcome, but probably not indicative of the overall portfolio. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much, Gustavo. I think at this point it would make sense to ask Juha to replace you and to address the annual evaluation report, and then conclusion of that we'll come back and adopt the decisions. So again, thank you, and Juha, over to you. Just as you were settling, Juha, just to remind you that you may not have heard, but Marita had a question which maybe you can address around gender outcomes. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon. The morning is already gone, and it's 12:30, so we try to be quick here. So the difference between the annual monitoring report and the annual evaluation report, which we present also for the 5th time now, is that we've been focusing only on the projects that have been completed and where you have terminal evaluations available. So, and this time around, we have not conducted any particular evaluations. So, do we have a, yeah. So we will just quite briefly present the results of the annual evaluation report on the terminal evaluations, as well as the status of the management action record of the LDCF-SCCF Council decisions. The work program and budget will be actually handled in under item 10. So I would like to invite my colleague Anna Wigg to make the presentation, and we'll try to be quick. Thanks.
Thank you, Juha. This year's annual evaluation report assessed 19 completed projects, and those are the projects that are submitted to our office in the calendar year. It's the largest cohort so far, but it's still not representative of the full range of the fund's objectives. Outcomes were in the satisfactory range for about 70% of the projects, and sustainability of outcomes is in the likely range for about 60%. And again, this is a sample that's pretty small, and it's not possible for us to identify trends from year to year. Innovative approaches. Most projects had innovative elements, which depend very much on the context of the projects. We looked for approaches that are new in the project area or to a specific issue tackled by the projects. On gender, while comparing project gender ratings at entry and at completion, there was some improvement at completion with fewer gender-blind projects. Regrettably, none were rated gender mainstreamed. Most, 12 out of the 19, were gender aware, which is just one step above gender blind. And These are older projects, so they're different from the ones that we just heard about in the monitoring report. In the management action record, we are tracking the decisions for the LDCF program evaluation and the SCCF program evaluation. Adoption of both has been rated medium overall.
Okay, so we will come back to the budget, but this is basically what we've done in the past year, and we have been also, just in addition to this analysis of these terminal evaluations, the 19 of them that we mentioned, we have also included LDCF and SCCF and adaptation-related issues in the OPS 6 evaluation. And for the next steps here, what we plan to do is to again produce yet another annual evaluation report for next summer's meeting or spring meeting, as we call them. Although I have been reminded that it will be a fall meeting in the southern hemisphere. And we are also planning to do a special study of the 48 projects that have been completed in the period of 2013 to 2017. So this is going to be another in-depth look into what has happened over the past a few years, and those won't again include the absolutely latest projects, but it is this cohort of completed projects. And we also intend to update the LDCF-SCCF monitoring and evaluation guidance document, which is linked obviously to the GEF overall evaluation policy, monitoring and evaluation policy, because it's important that we are harmonizing these also, and that will come to the council meeting in December, I believe. I think this is it for us from now. I think Anna actually already responded to the gender comment, in the sense that these are older projects that have been completed, and many of them have not been benefited from the later developments in the gender policy and in the gender mainstreaming thing. So hopefully we will see a continuation of this trend that is already upwards.
Thank you, Juha. Colleagues, some comments. Marita, I see your flag.
Thank you, Peter. No, I just wanted to follow up on my question. My question was really addressed to the LDCF team, not to the evaluation team. So I was just would be interested in hearing their comment on how they foresee to take this forward, if there's any way they foresee how this could be improved. Thank you.
Thank you, Marita. I think probably a question for Chisi or Gustavo, but first maybe a question or comment from Joss, UK, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Juha, and thanks for announcing your review of the 48 projects, because that was one of the things I've been asked to ask for, so that was very preemptive. For want of a better place in the agenda, I'd also just like to highlight our continuing interest in need for the development of stories derived from projects which our press office want and our evaluators want, where we get right down to a named individual in a named village and how the project is improving the lives of individuals. And this is very important for our people back home to understand the direct connection between what we're doing here and livelihood improvement for people in other places. So if that, I just want to go on record as saying that we need a continuous supply of those things through your communications department. Thank you.
Thank you, Joss. And briefly to Chisi or Gustavo. Thank you.
So the question from Marita, the answer is not different from what you had just pointed out. Is, you know, it's unfortunate that these old projects, because they didn't have effective screening tools to introduce these objectives, particularly by requiring gender disaggregated data to be reported. We didn't get that data back, or we weren't able to examine that. This doesn't mean that the gender wasn't considered at the agency level through their own processes, but that's what we have now. But these are older projects, and as the standards have improved over the years, so has this aspect in project design and implementation. And with the new gender policy that was approved, we expect that this is going to experience great advances and enhancements moving forward.
Thank you, Gustavo. I think that concludes this item, so we then need to move to adopting the decision. You may note that there is a very, very slight difference between the decision text that was in the paper and the decision text in the annotated agenda. We will clarify that in the final document, but essentially we are noting that the percentage of projects under implementation were rated in the either satisfactory or above range, or the moderately satisfactory and above range. So there is a slight difference between the two documents, just having that tidied up just now, but with that caveat, can we approve the decision? Thank you. I'll pass to Naoko for the next two agenda items on budgets.
Thank you so much. So we are moving to agenda item 9 and 10. It's an admin budget for LDCF and SCCF, and also the work program and budget for the evaluation office, IO office. So both of them. So maybe, Chis, you could start with.
Thank you. The fiscal year 19 administrative budget for the LDCF and SCCF is presented to the Council. The document summarizes activities undertaken during the fiscal year 18, supported by these two funds, by the GEF Secretariat, STAP, the Trustee, and the Independent Evaluation Office, and presents the proposed budget with explanations for the request. For the LDCF, the total fiscal year 19 budget request is $1.533,797, comprising of $1.042,797 for the GEF Secretariat, $128,000 for STAP, and $337,000 for the Trustee, and $26,000 for the IEO. And IEO will make its own presentation, right? For the SCCF, the total fiscal year 19 budget request is $753,000 and $576, comprising of $481,000 and $576,000 for the GEF Secretariat, $128,000 for the STAP, $118,000 for the Trustee, and $26,000 for the IEO. The LDCF budget request is $26,000 or 1.7% above the fiscal year 18 budget. The increase is primarily due to the budget increase request from the Trustee for investment management costs, which are reflected on the actual expenditures that were incurred in fiscal year 18 to be also reflected in fiscal year 19. The SCCF budget, on the other hand, is $27,450 or 3.5% less than the fiscal year 18 budget. The reduction is due to reduced budget requests for the GEF Secretariat, Trustee, the GEF IEO, and the flat request from the STAP. Now, should we?
Yes.
Okay, and I have already basically explained what our work program is for the next year, and it is pertains to the basically to the annual evaluation report, and also the policy and guidance that we have to be updating regarding the monitoring and evaluation. So I don't know even if we need this, but the point is what Chis has explained. It would be $26,000 from both the LDCF and SCCF for evaluation activities. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We would like to open the floor if there are any questions. Okay, if there is no question raised, okay. May, please.
Merci, Madame la
Thank you, Chair. My question has to do with the conversation we had on the Secretariat budget for GEF. I'm somewhat surprised that we are given a subject that increases 60% in real terms for the LDCF, as there's a massive increase last year, and I think it would be a better policy to compare the requested budget as opposed with the actually used budget. Here, I can understand that there are a number of reasons which account for the staff, that there is a underuse, which is massive, and you're asking us for a 60% increase? That's a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, France, for that question. I think you're referring to the actual cost for fiscal year 18 compared to the budget that was approved for fiscal year 18 as opposed to fiscal year 19. In terms of the staffing costs, there were a number of mitigating circumstances that led us to actually have a underrun on the staffing costs. For instance, we had unexpected staff departure, which posts yet to be filled. We also had delays in the actual fulfillment of recruitments, which have been actually done in the latter part of this particular fiscal year. So a lot of expenditures, as well as reflections that should have been actually taken into consideration in fiscal year 18 to be much closer to the approved budget, simply did not take place as originally anticipated. And now that some of these recruitment measures have already been taken into place, we do expect the budget request for fiscal year 19 to be more aligned with the actual staffing needs, as well as the reflection of some of the changes in the World Bank rules and procedures for the staffing. So if you compare the figures for the approved budget for fiscal year 18 and fiscal year 19, the actual increase is fairly modest. Thank you.
Yeah, I really made sure that we also actually applied or incorporate the potential saving coming from the GCI agreement. We checked the number, and I can assure you that the number reflects that kind of quantification. So, hope that we answer your question. With that, again, may I seek your approval for the budget. Thank you so much.
Okay, colleagues, keeping the pace going. Moving on to other business. Can I ask whether for the LDCF-SCCF meeting we have any other items? Okay, seeing no flags, then we move to joint summary.
Printing is going on.
Printing is going on. Okay, the joint summary will be coming very shortly. Colleagues, I haven't actually forewarned anyone about this, but before anyone gets up from their chairs, I have a favour to ask. We talk often about the GEF family, and I've certainly felt the warm embrace of the GEF family from colleagues in the Council and the Secretariat, and it's very valuable to me. So on family matters, today, some of you may know, I have a now 5-year-old daughter, and today is her birthday, and she has no understanding of why I am not with her in Canberra and why I'm here. her priorities clearly are not shared by the majority in this room. So just to show her that I'm not completely wasting my time and doing something that is of value, could I possibly ask you, once I hold my phone up, to look to my camera and say, "Happy birthday, Elena." And that would make her and me very, very happy. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to prepare. Happy birthday, Elena. Here we go. Okay, go.
Happy birthday, Elena.
Thank you very much. We'll be back with the joint summary very shortly.
And we save your marriage or your relationship with daughter.